My husband asked me to sleep with his best friend, and I said yes. I know what you're thinking right now, and trust me, I've asked myself the same question 1,000 times. How did I get here? How did a Sunday school teacher from Charleston, South Carolina, end up in a situation like this? But before you judge me, before you click away thinking you know exactly who I am, let me tell you my story. Because nothing, absolutely nothing, is what it seems. My name is Emma. I'm 34 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. I was married to David for 9 years. We had a beautiful house in the suburbs, 2 golden retrievers, and we were trying for a baby. David worked as a financial consultant, and I taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. We were that couple everyone envied at dinner parties. The one that still held hands at the movies. The one that finished each other's sentences. But perfection is just an illusion we sell to ourselves to avoid facing the cracks beneath the surface. It started on a Tuesday night in March. David came home late from work, which wasn't unusual, but there was something different about him. His eyes were red, not from crying exactly, but from something heavier, something that made my stomach turn even before he said a word. If you're curious about what happened next, make sure you're subscribed to this channel because this story only gets more intense. We're almost at 17,000 subscribers and your support means everything to me. Just click that subscribe button and let's continue. We sat at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared countless meals, where we'd planned our future, where we'd laughed until our sides hurt. That night, it felt like a courtroom. David poured himself a glass of whiskey, which he never did on weeknights, and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear mixed with determination, like someone about to jump off a cliff. "Emma, I need to tell you something," he said, and those 7 words changed everything. "I'm sick." The world tilted. Cancer, I thought immediately. Brain tumor, something terminal that would tear our life apart. But what came next was somehow worse. Somehow more complicated than anything I could have imagined. "I have a condition," he continued, his voice shaking. "It's called hypoactive sexual desire disorder. I've had it for years, even before we met. I've been seeing doctors, therapists, taking medication. Nothing works." He paused, finishing his whiskey in one gulp. "Emma, I love you more than anything in this world, but I can't give you what you need. And it's killing me to watch our marriage die because of something I can't control." I sat there frozen, trying to process what he was telling me. We'd had problems in the bedroom, yes, but I'd attributed it to stress, to his long hours at work, to the pressure of trying to conceive. I'd never imagined there was something medical behind it. And I'd certainly never imagined what he was about to propose. "I've been thinking about this for months," David said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "I talked to my therapist about it. Emma, I want you to be happy. I want you to have everything you deserve. And if I can't give it to you?" He took a deep breath. "What if there was someone else who could? Someone we both trust. Someone who could give you what you need while keeping our marriage intact." If you're shocked right now, imagine how I felt. And if you want to know what I said, what I did, you need to stay with me. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already because we're building a community here and we're so close to 17,000 subscribers. Your click matters. I pulled my hand away from his like I'd been burned. "Are you asking me what I think you're asking me?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. "Jake," David said simply. "My best friend Jake. He's single, he's trustworthy, he cares about both of us. It wouldn't be about love or romance. It would be about meeting a physical need, like going to the gym or getting a massage. It would be clinical, controlled. We'd set boundaries. And our marriage, the real connection we have, that would stay sacred. Jake. I'd known Jake almost as long as I'd known David. They'd been roommates in college, stood at each other's weddings. Jake was the godfather of our theoretical future children. He was handsome, yes. Over 6 feet tall with dark hair and green eyes that always seemed to see right through you. He was successful, running his own architecture firm in downtown Charleston. And he was lonely, having gone through a brutal divorce 2 years ago. "You've talked to him about this?" I asked, my voice rising despite my attempts to stay calm. "Not specifically," David admitted, "but I've hinted at it. I think he'd be open to helping us if we approached it the right way. Emma, please, just think about it. I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm just asking you to consider it as an option. Because the alternative is watching us fall apart, and I can't do that. I won't do that. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed next to my husband. This man I'd promised to love in sickness and in health, and felt like I was drowning. Was this sickness? Was this part of the vows I'd made? And if I said no, if I refused to even consider his proposal, would I be the one destroying our marriage? The next few weeks were torture. David didn't bring it up again, but it hung between us like smoke, poisoning every conversation, every touch, every moment of silence. I threw myself into work, staying late to grade papers, volunteering for every committee and field trip. Anything to avoid going home and facing the decision that waited for me there. Then came the dinner party. David and I were hosting, and of course, Jake was there. He brought an expensive bottle of wine and that easy smile that made everyone comfortable. We'd done this dozens of times before, but that night everything felt different. Every time Jake laughed at one of my jokes, every time his hand brushed mine passing a dish, every time I caught him looking at me, I wondered, did he know? Had David already planted the seed of this impossible idea in his mind? After the other guests left, Jake stayed to help clean up. This was normal. We'd done this countless times. But as I stood at the sink washing wine glasses and felt him standing close behind me, reaching around to put away plates, my heart was racing in a way it never had before. Emma, he said quietly, so quietly that David, who was in the living room putting away chairs, couldn't hear. I need to talk to you about something. David called me last week. My hands froze in the soapy water. So David had talked to him. This was real. This was happening. And if you think you know what I did next, think again. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel because we're getting to the part where everything changes. We're building something special here, almost 17,000 strong, and I need you to be part of it. Click subscribe and let's keep going together. I told him I needed time to think about it. Jake continued, his voice low and careful. Emma, I need you to know that I would never, ever do anything to hurt you or David. You're family to me. But I also need you to know that if this is something you both truly want, if this is something that would help your marriage, I would consider it. Because I care about both of you that much. I turned to face him, my hands still dripping with dishwater, and found him closer than I'd expected. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, close enough that I could see the conflict in his eyes. He meant what he said, I could tell. He was as torn about this as I was, as confused and conflicted and terrified. Jake, I don't know what I want, I admitted, my voice cracking. I don't know if this is the bravest thing we could do or the stupidest. I don't know if we're trying to save our marriage or destroy it in the most creative way possible. Then maybe we should all talk about it, Jake suggested. The three of us, sitting down like adults, setting clear boundaries and expectations. No secrets, no lies, everything out in the open. And if any of us feels uncomfortable at any point, we stop. Immediately. That conversation happened 3 days later. We sat in our living room, the three of us, and talked about things I never imagined discussing with anyone, let alone my husband and his best friend. David explained his condition in detail, how it affected not just his desire but his ability to feel aroused, how much he'd tried to fix it, how hopeless he felt. Jake talked about his divorce, how his ex-wife had left him because he'd worked too much, how lonely he'd been, how much he valued our friendship and didn't want to lose it. And I talked about my needs, my fears, my guilt, over even considering this. I talked about how much I loved David, how that love had nothing to do with physical intimacy but everything to do with the life we'd built together. I talked about my fear that if we did this, we could never go back, never undo what we'd done. We set rules. So many rules. It would only be physical, never emotional. It would happen at a hotel, never in our home. David would know when and where. Complete transparency. We'd reassess every month, and any one of us could end it at any time, no questions asked. And we'd tell no one, not our families, not our other friends, no one who could judge us for trying to save our marriage in an unconventional way. I said yes on a Thursday afternoon in April. David held me while I cried, not from sadness exactly, but from the weight of the decision, from the fear of what we were about to do. And Jake, when we told him, looked relieved and terrified in equal measure. If you're still with me, if you're trying to understand how someone could make this choice, thank you. Thank you for not judging, for listening, for being part of this community. We're so close to 17,000 subscribers, and every single one of you matters. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because this story is far from over. The first time was scheduled for a Saturday night, 2 weeks later. Jake booked a room at a boutique hotel near the waterfront, somewhere discreet where we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. I spent the entire day feeling like I was preparing for my own execution. I changed my outfit 4 times. I couldn't eat. David was calm, almost too calm, and that scared me more than anything. "Emma," he said as I was getting ready to leave, "you don't have to do this. We can call it off right now. We can find another way." But there was no other way, and we both knew it. We'd already tried everything else. This was our last option before divorce, before our perfect life crumbled into nothing. I drove to the hotel with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Jake was waiting in the lobby, looking as nervous as I felt. We didn't talk much as we went up to the room, both of us terrified of saying the wrong thing, of making this more awkward than it already was. The room was beautiful, overlooking the harbor, with soft lighting and music playing quietly from a speaker. Jake had thought of everything, trying to make this as comfortable as possible. We sat on the edge of the bed, both of us staring at the floor, until finally he reached over and took my hand. "Emma, we don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with," he said gently. "We can just talk. We can watch a movie. There's no pressure here." But there was pressure, enormous pressure, because my marriage was depending on this. Because David was at home waiting to hear how it went, trusting both of us to do this thing that should have been impossible. Because if I backed out now, we'd all know we'd failed before we even tried. What happened next, I won't describe in detail because some things should stay private, even in a story like this. But I will tell you that it was strange and familiar all at once. Jake was gentle, patient, constantly checking in to make sure I was okay. And I was okay. Or at least I thought I was in that moment. It wasn't until I was driving home afterward, tears streaming down my face, that I realized how not okay I actually was. David was waiting up for me. He held me while I cried, whispering that he loved me, that he was proud of me, that this was going to save us. And in that moment, I wanted to believe him. I wanted so desperately to believe that what we'd just done was heroic somehow, revolutionary, a modern solution to an ancient problem. But over the next few months, as it happened again and again, every 2 or 3 weeks like clockwork, I started to feel something I hadn't anticipated. I started to feel something for Jake that went beyond the physical. I started to look forward to our nights together. I started to think about him during the day, to text him things that had nothing to do with our arrangement. And he, I could tell, was starting to feel the same way. Are you seeing where this is going? Because I didn't. Not until it was too late. If you want to know what happened when everything fell apart, you need to stay subscribed to this channel. We're building something real here, almost at 17,000 subscribers, and your support is what keeps these stories coming. Click that button and be part of our community. The turning point came on a rainy night in August. Jake and I were at our usual hotel, but something was different. The way he looked at me, the way he touched me, the way he said my name. It wasn't clinical anymore. It wasn't just about meeting a need. There were feelings involved, real feelings, and we both knew we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. "Emma, I'm falling for you," Jake whispered as we lay there afterward, the rain beating against the windows. "I know I shouldn't. I know this wasn't supposed to happen. But I can't help it. Every time I'm with you, every time I see you smile, every time you text me something funny during the day, I fall a little bit more. I should have stopped him. I should have reminded him of the rules, of the boundaries, of the fact that I was married to his best friend, and this was supposed to be purely physical. But instead, I said the words I'd been holding back for weeks. I'm falling for you too. We lay there in silence, both of us knowing we'd just destroyed everything. The arrangement was supposed to save my marriage, not end it. It was supposed to be a sacrifice I made for David, not a betrayal. But it had become both, and I didn't know how to fix it. I tried to hide it from David, but he knew something had changed. He could see it in the way I smiled at my phone when Jake texted. He could feel it in the distance that had grown between us, a distance that was supposed to be closing but was instead widening into a chasm. The confrontation happened on a Sunday morning in September. David and I were having breakfast on our back porch, trying to maintain the illusion of normalcy, when he suddenly put down his coffee and looked at me with eyes full of pain. "You're in love with him," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. I could have denied it. I should have denied it. But I was so tired of lying, so tired of pretending, so tired of trying to be 3 different versions of myself for 3 different people. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know what I'm feeling anymore. I love you, David. I love the life we built together. But I also feel something for Jake, and I don't know if that's real or if it's just because of this impossible situation we've created." David stood up, his chair scraping against the wood deck, and I thought he was going to yell, to throw something, to finally show the anger he had every right to feel. But instead, he just looked at me with this expression of profound sadness and said, "This is my fault. I asked you to do something no wife should have to do, and now I'm losing you because of it." "You're not losing me," I insisted, standing up and trying to take his hands, but he pulled away. "Emma, be honest with me. If you had to choose right now, if I said you can't see Jake anymore, that we go back to how things were before all of this started, could you do it? Could you give him up?" The fact that I hesitated, even for a second, told us both everything we needed to know. This is where things get really complicated, so make sure you're subscribed to see how this unfolds. We're almost at 17,000 subscribers, and this community means everything to me. Your click helps keep these real stories coming. Hit that subscribe button now. David moved out that week. Not permanently, he said, just until we could figure things out. He stayed with his brother in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was left alone in our house with our 2 dogs and the ghost of our perfect life. Jake wanted to be there for me, to help me through it, but I told him I needed space, because I realized that I couldn't figure out what I truly wanted if he was there clouding my judgment. For 3 weeks, I was alone with my thoughts, and they were brutal. I thought about David, about the 9 years we'd spent together, about the dreams we'd shared. I thought about Jake, about the passion and excitement he'd brought into my life, about how alive I felt when I was with him. And I thought about myself, about who I'd become, about whether I'd made the bravest choice or the stupidest one. I called my mom, something I'd been avoiding because I knew she'd have opinions. I didn't tell her the whole truth, just that David and I were having problems and I'd developed feelings for someone else. She listened quietly, and when I finished, she said something I'll never forget. "Emma, honey, marriage isn't about perfect love. It's about choosing to love the same person every single day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. This other man, he's exciting because he's new, because there's no history of bills and arguments and disappointments. But David, he's the one who's been there through everything. He's the one who loved you enough to make an impossible sacrifice for you. And now you have to decide, do you want excitement or do you want partnership?" But she didn't know the whole story. She didn't know that David's sacrifice had come with consequences neither of us had anticipated. She didn't know that Jake wasn't just exciting, he was kind and funny and understood parts of me that David never had. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was David calling from Charlotte at 2 a.m, drunk and crying. "Emma, I made a terrible mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. I thought I was being selfless, but I was just being a coward. I was too scared to face my problem, too scared to do the real work of fixing our marriage, so I handed you off to someone else and called it a solution. And now I've lost you. And it's what I deserve." I listened to him sob through the phone, this man I'd loved for nearly a decade. This man who'd given me everything except the one thing I'd needed, and I felt my heart breaking all over again. Because he was right. He had been a coward. But so had I. We'd both been so afraid of losing each other that we'd created a situation guaranteed to destroy us. "David," I said quietly, "come home. Come home and let's talk about this. Really talk about it. No more running. No more hiding. No more easy solutions. Just you and me, figuring this out." He came home the next day. We sat on our back porch again, the same place where everything had fallen apart, and we talked for hours. We talked about his condition, about how he'd never really dealt with it emotionally, how he'd just tried to find workarounds instead of accepting it and finding a different way forward. We talked about my needs, about how I'd been so focused on the physical that I'd forgotten about the emotional intimacy we used to have. We talked about Jake, about how this arrangement had been unfair to all three of us from the start. And then David said something that surprised me. "I want to try to fix this, Emma. Our marriage, I mean. But I understand if it's too late. I understand if you've fallen in love with Jake and that's where your heart is now. I just need you to be honest with me and with yourself about what you really want. Are you still with me? Because this is where I need you most. We're so close to 17,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Click that subscribe button and let's get through this together." I thought about it for a long time. Days turned into weeks, and I saw both David and Jake during that time, trying to figure out what my heart was really telling me. With David, everything was comfortable and familiar. We knew each other's rhythms, we had shared history, we had a foundation that Jake and I could never have. But there was also pain there, and disappointment, and the ghost of the arrangement that had nearly destroyed us. With Jake, everything was passion and excitement. Every conversation felt important. Every touch felt electric. Every moment felt like the beginning of something rather than the middle. But there was also guilt. Mountains of guilt, because I couldn't look at him without thinking about David, without remembering that this man was supposed to be helping my marriage, not ending it. The decision came on a cold October morning. I woke up in my empty house with my 2 dogs sprawled across the bed, and I realized something important. I'd been so focused on choosing between David and Jake that I'd forgotten about the third option, choosing myself. Choosing to figure out who I was outside of both of these relationships, outside of being someone's wife or someone's something else. I called them both separately and told them the truth. I needed time alone, real time, not just a few weeks, but months maybe, to figure out what I wanted from my life, from my relationships, from my future. David was devastated but understanding. Jake was hurt but respectful. And me, I felt lighter than I had in months, like I'd finally stopped trying to be everything to everyone and could just be Emma again. That was 3 weeks ago. David and I have started marriage counseling, real counseling with a therapist who specializes in sexual disorders and the complications they create. We're not living together yet, but we're talking more honestly than we have in years. We're facing his condition head-on, exploring medical options we'd given up on, discussing whether a sexless marriage could actually work for both of us if we approached it differently. Jake and I are not talking right now. It's too complicated, too painful, too full of what-ifs and might-have-beens. Maybe someday we can be friends again. But right now, we need distance. He needs to heal from this impossible situation David put him in, and I need to figure out if what I felt for him was real or just a byproduct of the strangest arrangement in modern marriage history. And me? I'm learning to be okay with not having all the answers. I'm learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you don't know what comes next. I'm learning that marriage is messy and complicated and sometimes requires you to make choices that don't make sense to anyone else, not even to yourself. So here's where I am today, 3 weeks after pressing pause on everything, 3 weeks after choosing myself for the first time in my adult life. I don't know if David and I will stay married. I don't know if what we had can be rebuilt after everything we've been through. I don't know if Jake was the love of my life or just a beautiful, complicated mistake. I don't know if my husband's proposal was the most selfless act in the world or the most selfish, if it saved our marriage or destroyed it, if I should be grateful or furious. What I do know is this. I'm 34 years old. I'm a third-grade teacher from Charleston, South Carolina, and I'm trying my best to navigate the most complicated situation of my life. I made choices that some of you will understand and others will judge harshly. I agreed to sleep with my husband's best friend because my husband asked me to, and in the process I discovered things about myself, about love, about marriage, about desire that I never expected to learn. Before we wrap up, I need your help. We're almost at 17,000 subscribers, and building this community has been incredible. If this story made you think, if it challenged you, if it made you feel something, please click that subscribe button. Be part of this journey with me. So now I'm turning this back to you, because I genuinely want to know. What would you do in my place? Would you try to rebuild your marriage with David, knowing that the physical intimacy might never be what you need? Would you pursue a relationship with Jake, despite how it started, despite the betrayal it represents? Or would you walk away from both of them and start fresh, choosing yourself over either option? Tell me in the comments, what would you do? Because right now, sitting here in my house with my 2 dogs and my uncertain future, I honestly don't know what the right answer is. Maybe there isn't a right answer. Maybe there are just choices and consequences, and the hope that somehow we find our way to something better on the other side. This is my story. This is my truth. And this is my question to you. What would you do in my place?